Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar on planning for parents of Gen Z. Here we're going to be talking about passing knowledge and values along with your wealth. My name is Deirdre Wheatley-Liss and I will be your host today. I am delighted to bring you this newest installment of our Porzio Planning webinar series. Our mission is very simple. A knowledgeable family is an empowered family. So each month we take the opportunity to connect you with the people that we learn from working jointly with other clients. And, in terms of what makes this a good use of your time today, I just hope that everybody has a moment of, wow, I didn't know that. And then I'll consider our mission to be complete. Before we get to the heart of the matter, though, we'd like to find out a little bit more about you. So I would like to ask you to join in a couple of quick polls so that we can better direct our comments to you. The first one that we're going to ask is very simple, gender-based. We're trying to see, women in the audience versus men that are in the audience. I say this because when it comes to the roles of raising our children, we want to be able to talk to the people in terms of, what it is that they're thinking about and what challenges they face in their own professional lives, as well as juggling with children. The next one that we're going to get to, and this will close down in just a second here, is this month we are focusing on parents who are still parenting their children, whether they're 5, 15, or 25. And as parents, proactive planning for your children is absolutely essential for them to have the bright future that you want them to be able to have. Our Gen Zers, who are born between 1995 and 2015, are now in grade school, they're in college, or they're just entering the workforce. And we're going to talk about how to build a strong financial foundation for them, along with not forgetting your own needs and goals, something we tend to do as parents. So our second poll that I'd like to launch is just to find out a better idea of who are you parenting. Whichever one most fits for you, whether it's school age, college age, or maybe you have the joy like I do of parenting a new legally minted adult. So we'll give that a few seconds there. So, and then when we close that down, I want to go ahead and introduce myself in a little bit more detail and then also introduce our speaker for today. I'm an attorney and principal in the Wealth Preservation Group at Porzio, Bromberg & Newman. I'm also one of the founders of PorZioPlanning.com, which is a complimentary service offering that we have to the community to provide information related to estate planning, elder law, asset protection planning, and related litigation issues. You may have a very good idea of what it is that an estate planning attorney does, and if you've been following these, also what an elder law attorney does, but you may not have any idea how a financial planner who really focuses on the next generation can help you provide a financial foundation for yourself and for your children. With that, Rebecca, do you want to take an opportunity to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. We've been working together for a while, and I'm delighted to speak to your audience and just talk a little bit about what I do, how I work with clients, and how I help make sure that whatever the parents want their children to do with their inheritance, we achieve that. So my name is Rebecca Powell. I'm a senior financial advisor here at Wells Fargo. I have been in the financial industry for more than 30 years. For the last 20 of it, I focus mostly on financial planning, helping clients organize and prioritize their financial lives. I would say clients come to me for a lot of reasons, right? They want to see, most of the questions they have, can I even afford to send my kid to college? Can I maintain my lifestyle upon retirement? Should I buy that new home? How much should I be giving to charity, my adult children, or even other family members? And what I try to do is to help them identify those goals that they're trying to accomplish. And then we work together to help through in-depth conversation to build a plan designed to achieve what it is that they're trying to do. My ultimate goal is to help my clients have financial confidence in whatever it is that they're trying to do.
That's wonderful. So if that's us, let's find out a little bit more about you today. Alex, could you show us the results of our first poll, please? All right, so we're not.
Yeah,
entirely evenly split. But Rebecca, are you a little surprised by those poll results?
I am. Again, this is why we do these polls, because I would think that mostly, we're going to be joined by a lot of women. I work with both, I work with families, I work with women. Most of my clients, even though they're families, I do a lot of the work with the women, because one of the things that I notice, even though you may have a woman who is home, they're the ones who are making the financial decisions in the end. And so I am pleasantly surprised that we're joined by 40% plus male. So that's really eye-opening for me. One of the things that we see statistically is the transfer of wealth over the next 20 years. Women is going to control about 58% of that. So it's so important for women to understand and lean into the issues around money and to talk about it and be comfortable talking about it, because that's one of the things I find as an advisor when I sit with, and I'm talking clients who are women who are running organizations, big companies, and they're still, when it comes to money, they tend to defer to their husband. So I'm happy to see that we have the majority of women are here, but I'm also happy that, and I encourage my clients to always have that discussion, because I think that's when both of you are on the same page, I think you're going to accomplish more than having that tug of war. And oftentimes women outlive men, and I think if they're both on the same page, it's not so difficult when the woman has to take over handling the finances on their own.
And also, I mean, so we're dealing here with parents today. So Alex, can you throw up our second poll so we can get our results on that, sort of see like who we're parenting right now? All right, relatively even split, but a lot with the college planning in terms of what it is that we're looking at. So another thing to consider is that regardless, there tends to be divisions within a partnership of parents in terms of who it is that's responsible for what. But what I have found is that uniformly, parents are interested in whatever knowledge and skills that each of them bring to the table, of being able to pass that along to their children as well. And Rebecca, as you did note earlier, there's this huge pull between I need to want to I've promised myself that I would provide for my children's education, and I need to want to be able to retire someday. And on top of that, when we recognize that potentially as parents that we're in a situation where we feel like we really need to choose one between the other, what are the kinds of skills then that we can impart upon our children when they're younger, so that maybe when they get to be our age, they find themselves in a better situation than we find ourselves in. So with that, I asked, Rebecca, as we were sort of preparing in terms of this talk, is, when you're looking at investment planning, so let's say that you're trying to have that conversation with your children. What does investment planning look like? So for your college student who maybe has that summer job and they're trying to figure out, do they want to buy a new car? Do they want to save for a trip? What is it that they want to do? All the way to yourselves, when you're looking at that dichotomy decision between the college funding and the retirement, what are sort of the basics, Rebecca, that people should be thinking about?
So before I even go into any of those specifics, I have to do my disclaimer, right? So just keep in mind that anything that we talk about today is not specific financial advice, because everybody's situation is different. And that's one of the things that I do when I sit with clients. I am very focused on the individual. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is more broad-based. And I also have to say that when we talk about investments, there are risks associated with it, right? Including and up to loss of principal. So now that I've got my disclaimers out of the way, to go back to, I think you start with having conversation with children at very young age, right? I come from a family where that was not a thing, right? There was no such thing as a budget or how much money was coming in. And I think a lot of time people bring those into whatever relationships they have later on in life. So I find that for me, I wanted to change that dynamic on a personal level. And I do a lot of education with my clients by talking to their younger children that are not doing basic talk about, having chores. There's nothing wrong with children having chores and having that responsibility and earning money for things that they want to buy, right? So that you start building that at a young age. And I think once you start having those basic, that carries on later on in life. When I start with a client, I said the very first thing that we need to do is we need to talk about a budget, right? And what's the first thing that comes into play when you're talking about a budget? How much money is coming in and how much money is going out. And in order to do that, I think you have to be very specific. It can't be, well, we're bringing $2,000 a month and we're spending $1,600. But if you are not specific enough, and so this is why when I work with clients, we get very specific. It's very nitty gritty. I say, take your checkbook or your statement for the last 30 days. And then we go through, what is down to the cup of coffee that you get at Starbucks or wherever it is. Because part of what you want to do, you want to identify if we get to the point where we see you're spending more than you're making each month, then we need to look at how can we make adjustments to make sure that you're still doing the things that you want to do, but making sure that you're not forgetting to save for that college, right? If you want to help your children, or your retirement. One of the things that we have to be aware of, and a lot of us we see we're in that age where we have kids in college, or they're young adults, or they're still kids that we're saving for college, right? So, but you still have to balance your personal retirement. As much as we love our children and want to think that, they're going to pay us back by having us live with them, the reality of it is, I don't think that's okay. My kids already told me that, I'm not going to live with them. I don't know that I really want to live with them, but to be serious about that, it's all about balance, right? I talked about that a little bit before, that everything needs to be a balance. If I'm going to help my child with college, I also want to make sure that I'm saving for my retirement. What I find is if you start saving for retirement earlier, you have a better chance of achieving the goal that you want. And how do you even know what your retirement is going to be, right? We can plan for things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work out the way we want to. However, if we start planning early, things are going to crop up that you can say, okay, we can make adjustment. None of us planned for a pandemic, right? And so we go back to the budgeting part of it. I say to clients, in the past, I used to say, let's have 6 months worth of spending money. That means if you lose your job and it's going to take you 6 months to find a job, you can still live the life that you're living. Since the pandemic came along, I changed that and I say to clients, let's keep 12 months because again,
really,
I did.
You have. So Alex, if you can go forward one slide, so I think of this as like an emergency fund. And I do think that when kids are younger, that they need to think about, to your point, where is it that I'm spending things and what is it, what if I need to, sometimes it might be in one, what if I want to fly somewhere? What if I need to fly somewhere? So I think it's that discipline that we can help with our children to be able to say, here's money for if it doesn't go every way that you want to. And honestly, it's not us moving in with you. You may not want to move back in with us. So
I know. So going back to where you were talking about, let's start with at the very beginning, chores, right? Some people start at 5. Some people start when the kids are a little bit older, right? So you want them to have some kind of responsibility. If you want to buy that card, the trading cards that they trade, the kids, they trade those cards and it costs $1. I would say, okay, if you make your bed every single day this week, you will earn some money and then you can decide what you want to do with that. The difference that I've seen between my children, I'm using my kids a lot of as an example today, because I have one of each. I have a boy and a girl, and I can see the difference. My daughter, when she was younger, was more of, okay, I'm just going to spend everything. Where my son, on the other hand, was, I'm just going to save everything, right? And that's something that I see them carrying now that they're into more, they're launching into adulthood. I still see she's adjusted some, my daughter has adjusted some, but my son is still a saver. And that was, he was always a kid where if, I'm going to pay you $1 for making your bed, he was going to save 75 cents and spend 25, where my daughter was more like, I'm going to spend 80 cents and save 20. And, as she gets older and we've had these one-on-one conversations, especially, we're talking about Gen Z, they've been through so much where, the Great Recession, they've been through a lot. So a lot of their thinking have changed from what it used to be, where as parents, we were just providing everything for them. And there were situations where, living in a town where families lost their jobs and, kids came to realize, yes, we have to make choices on certain things. And I think that's the way you look at saving for college and helping a kid for college and saving for your retirement. I don't think your retirement should suffer because you're trying to help your children with college. And we'll get a little bit more specific, Deirdre, about different ways that we can help the kids with college,
Sure.
not necessarily where you're paying for that out of
Yes.
pocket.
With the investment, just sort of like your basics of investment planning. So we sort of talked about savings, about having an emergency fund, right? What about young people taking on debt? So, I have a personal story of somebody that I knew that when I was in college, and they were just handing out credit cards, right? Just have a credit card,
Yes.
have a credit card for that, right? But the person had no income, so I really wasn't sure why the credit card companies were handing them out. And debt can get to be a problem. It can get to be expensive. So, what's sort of like a quick thought that parents can have when teaching their kids about, I don't know if you want to say good debt and bad debt, but how debt sort of goes to your overall investment planning.
So on the sheet that we talked about initially, I had it labeled as debt, and then I changed it in my notes to credit, right? Because I think credit 101. And what I look at that as is your credit report is really like your report that you would get when you were in college or high school or whatever, right? So it can go from 300 to 850. And the better you're able to have that credit report, your credit score, the more beneficial you're going to be able to do in life, right? One of the things that I advise clients to do on behalf of their children to help them build credit is, when your kids go to college, we're going to help them. They're going to buy food, they're going to buy things. So one of the things that I advise my clients to do is it's your credit card, but you have it in your children's name, right? In your child's name. That child is whatever they're going to buy, they use it every month. And as a parent, instead of you sending the money to them, you just pay that. What you're doing in the meantime is helping that child build credit, right, over time. There are good debt. I think a mortgage is a very good debt, but it also depends on where you are in life. Not everybody should be buying a home because, it's not the days of you staying in the same place. People tend to move a lot. So you also have to take that into consideration, whether or not you want to take on, a 30-year mortgage or a 15-year mortgage. That said, if you right now are listening to this and you have a mortgage and you plan on staying in the home for a while, this time is a great time to revisit that. And that's part of the entire planning that I think clients need to do with their financial advisor, right? I do that with my clients. It's not just looking at the investment part. I look at a complete financial plan, and that includes debt. We look at, what kind of mortgage you have. There were people who still were paying 6% for rate on their mortgages. You can refinance, and even especially if you're going to stay into that home for 5, 6, 7, 10 years, right? You can refinance and still pay the same amount, but you reduce your rate from 6% down to 2.7 or even 3%, which is half of what you're paying. And there you free up some cash that can go towards retirement or whatever else that it is that you want to do. So, when we talk about investing, it's not just, and Deirdre, not to cut you off, but investing is different than savings, because that sometimes people get those terms, interchange those terms, and that's not, they're different, right? Savings to me, and what I educate my clients, savings should be your money, that 6 to 12 months that you're not putting in the market. So you are not worried that, you know, the Dow Jones is down 500 points today, or it's up 1,500 points tomorrow, because that money, that 6 to 12 months worth of money, should not be invested in the market. And that's just my personal opinion. That's how I guide my clients. I think you need to keep the money. So the market is going to go up and down. That's just the reality of what investment is. Investment is you putting money to make money, right? Your money to pay your bills should not be in the market.
Excellent. So a couple of things here, because again, we're trying to pass along the idea of knowledge with money, because unfortunately, as an attorney, I've seen situations where people receive money with no knowledge, and it probably doesn't turn out the way that the people who left them the money intended it to be. You know, so you'd mentioned about savings, and also a great tip on building credit. But if we're building credit when they're at college, let's flip to talking about college funding. How is it that people can look to fund for college? What should they be thinking about? What does the reality of that planning look like if you have an advanced perspective on it?
So, and this is one thing people don't think about. If you have children who are super smart, right, and your income is below 125,000, and those children can get into any of those Ivy Leagues or those top tier schools, that's where those kids should go. And the reason you want to do that, 99% of the time, those children are going to go to college for free. So, you know, it's changed a little bit, but if you're making 100,000 as a family, and your children can get into a Princeton or Harvard or whatever, and that's where they should go, because 99% of the time, those kids are going to come out of college with you having to come out of pocket, because they're going to get what's considered needs-based from those schools. And I know a lot of time people are terrified. Oh, I can't apply. I'm not going to get in. Again, not everybody's going to get into a Harvard or Princeton or whatever, but there are all these colleges are trying to attract children from different areas, background. If your children want to go to California, there are times where a Jersey kid will get scholarship money, merit-based scholarship money for going to a school in California or Georgia or some of the, so those are some of the things that parents can look at, and not just limit it to be, well, I just want you on the East Coast, or I want you to be within, 25 miles of where I am. You can, in addition to that, you can do the 529 college savings, and there are two options with that, right? There's one that's called prepaid tuitions. I have not recommended that for my children or for my clients, but for some people that may be a good thing to use, right? So basically, you're prepaying college at a discount. The problem with that I have seen people run into is the kid grow up and they're like, oh, I don't want to go to that college. But now you already paid that school, right? You may be able to get some of that money back, but you are not going to get what you had intended. Now, on the other hand, I've had friends who moved to Florida, the tuition was prepaid, the kids went to Florida, and it ended up where the cost of college for those children were a lot less than if they were paying those tuition today. The other thing that you want to look at, there's so many different types of scholarships. It's a lot of work that you have to do, but it can pay off tremendously. They're merit-based scholarship. There are all these different types, and you have to search for it, right? It's not, they're the ones that everybody knows about, the GE, but then there are other scholarship. Your father was a firefighter. Your mother was, the first person in, like, I got a scholarship as a first generation person in my family to go to college. So there are things out there. You have to do the work, but there are tons of ways out there that can help the children when they're going to college. I think the loans should be the last resort. I also think there's nothing wrong with having the children take a loan and have skin in the game. That's what I say. $2,500 is not going. Listen, I don't. If you can afford to not have your kid graduate with hundreds and thousands of dollars in debt, but if they're going to graduate with $2,500 in debt, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because I think those classes that they're going to sleep through, if you're the one paying for it all the time, if they have a little bit of investment in that, they're going to get up, they're going to go to class, they're going to be more invested. So I don't think there's anything wrong with having them either contributing from saving from the summer jobs that they have, or taking a $2,500 loan over the 4 years to help with their education. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all.
So Rebecca, what about the 529 plans? It seems that, everybody does them. You need to do a 529 plan. Are there maybe situations where people, and again, we're considering ourselves versus our children, 529 plans versus retirement planning? And we'll talk more about retirement planning on the back end. But while a 529 allows you to put in dollars and have them grow tax deferred, I've also seen people with funded plans.
It's tax-free. It's tax-free if it's used for college. So that's beautiful. It's tax-free if it's used for college. It's tax deferred if you don't use it for college. So I've had clients who put the money in for the kid. The kid end up getting scholarships, so they don't need that money. The parents just let that money sit there and continue to grow tax deferred. In the end, they have to pay on the gains, but all that earning is being grown tax deferred over those years. So you do, because the money is not going to be used for college, you are going to end up paying a 10% penalty on the gains. But just think about the compounding that has happened over 10, 15, 20 years. Again, that's one way that you can use that to supplement your retirement. And I've also found where parents have gone back in grad school and used that money for themselves. So just because I have it for my daughter, if my daughter gets a scholarship, that money can be used for another child. And one of the things that that has changed with the tax laws lately is up to $10,000 can be used towards high school or private high school or anything under college. So there's you have a little bit more freedom than it used to be. So I think if you can afford to do that, it's a good thing. If you can't afford to do that, like I said, there's nothing wrong with, I worked my way through college. So there's nothing wrong with your kid going to county for 2 years and then, going on to grad school and work. I work all through 4 years of college. And I think that was a good work ethic.
Yeah, as somebody who has seen many, many resumes over the years, I really could care less where somebody got their first 2 years of school versus where they graduated from. So I do, for those of you who are here in New Jersey, who are maybe looking at this, particularly if your child doesn't know particularly exactly what they want to do. And also, right now, all the classes are online in any event. I would encourage you to look at our community college system. We really have a really fabulous system that allows you to take classes there potentially for free. If they're not for free, they're usually around 1/10 of the credit hour, and then roll all those classes into one of our state universities here in New Jersey. So that's on the college end. So I just want to flip, to some of you, because, there's a large swath of you that have younger children. So we talked about, going from chores to have value for how it is that things are worth with money. But then what do you need to do as parents? As I am coming at this as an attorney, you have to have guardians in your documents for your children. If you haven't gotten around to doing your will, and the last time I looked it up, I think 47% of Americans had their will done, and that was a study from care.com. If you're in the majority then that hasn't done their will and you have a child, you need to put something together to name guardians for your kids. I don't care if you go to LegalZoom.com and download something, but if you don't name guardians for your children, somebody that you never met is going to be doing that. The other thing is, and this is particularly relevant during the pandemic that we're experiencing, is that there's a concept of a standby guardian in New Jersey. So a standby guardian is someone that you name if you don't have the capability of taking care of your child. And I've had a lot of discussions, particularly with single parents who are concerned, what if I suddenly got sick and there's no one here near me, my family's on the other coast to be able to take care of my children. Well, your neighbors can't just swoop in if you suddenly got carted off to the hospital and said, hey, I'll just take care of them. The police aren't going to let that happen. But if you've given your neighbors, your close friend, whatever the case may be, authority, you know that your children will be cared for if something unexpected happens. So don't just think of guardianship if you get hit by a meteorite. Think of guardianship for your minor children in the event of an emergency. And then the next thing that I just want to talk about is, again, we're talking about passing values with money. I see a lot of these trusts where individuals get access to the money at a certain age, 25, 30, 35. Well, how do you know how wise somebody is at 25, 30, and 35? I mean, Rebecca's got 2 children. She has described 2 different individuals to you in terms of how it is that they approach things. And the thing is with an inheritance is you can only give it away once. It's not going to be continuing to be there at all. So one of the things to think about if you're maybe designing a trust is, why are you doing it? Is it because you don't want them to have money until they're 18? You don't want them to have money until they're after college? You want to wait till they have children? What is the purpose of it? And instead of thinking of ages, maybe think of a mechanism where there is a co-trustee, somebody who works with the child about the money, to be able to give them that knowledge about, what are different asset classes? What is an ETF? Why is it that high risk is high return, and what's the risk about it, and how much do I want of that? What is that word diversification? What does it mean? These are all in Rebecca's world, but if we're here as parents thinking we want to be more educated about these things, imagine being our children without all of our life experience and just being handed money without any sort of thought process as to what to do with it. So consider that co-trustee item. So we've spoken a lot about the college and the investment planning, and we do have a question here. And if there's more, please put them in the chat. We're happy to answer them. So someone has a college teen with a debit card, and his teen account is linked to their account, but he constantly overspends this particular one. And the question is it potentially harming my credit? So is there a reason to not connect potentially your finances with your new adult child?
I personally, in that sense, I would delink that account because that child needs to understand. It's okay if it happened once, but if it's a constant, if it's something that's happening constantly, I would delink that because they need to understand that you're not going to constantly bail them out. And I think that's part of what we as parents have been doing for the kids for a long time is we constantly bail them out so they know that, yeah, we're supposed to have a safety net, but if they're abusing it in the sense that it's more that you did it once, we talked about it, you did. I personally would be my 3 strikes and you're out. 3 strikes and you're on. Yeah, nope, you don't get that option again.
No problem. So let's turn from our child's future to our future. So Alex, if you can advance the slide. So we talked about sort of investment planning 101. How does retirement planning differ from investment planning?
So retirement planning, I think, that's the part that I love about what I do, right? Because I think if you start doing that early, you can really, you're like, I'm making 20 grand, I'm never going to be a millionaire. Yes, you can. If you start when you're in your 20s, putting and getting into that habit. And this is the one thing that, Deirdre, before we went live, I was telling you about how my daughter has changed about her spending habit. The one thing that when she started her real job out of college, I said to her, anytime you get a raise, just pretend it never happened and that money goes into an investment account. So we set it up every time she gets a raise, that money goes right to her investment account because she was living and doing all the things that she was doing before she got that raise. The other thing that every person who is listening, if you haven't done that, And I know it's hard for people to say, oh, I can't afford to put money away for retirement because I have to meet my basic needs. If you're working in a company that does a match to whatever you put in your 401k, some companies will match dollar for dollar, some will match 50 cents on the dollar. And when you look at it tax wise, if you just put in up to the amount that the company is going to match, you will end up better off than waiting till you are done with, like we were talking about, taking care of the kids and doing all of that. Because by not doing that, what you're doing is leaving money on the table. That 2% or that 3% or that 4% is money that you are literally leaving on the table by not putting in that money. And if you work with your tax accountant or your financial advisor, they can show you that the difference of putting that money in, because that money comes out of your paycheck before anything else, it comes out tax deferred. You actually not reducing your take-home pay by that much. So if you work for a company that does a match, and if they match dollar for dollar, definitely, and you can afford to do it, try to do that. The other thing that helps is to automate that amount, right? So if you're putting in 4% and you try increasing each year by 5%, and I know every company is different for what they do for raises, but most people are getting more than a 2% raise. So if you are meeting your basic needs and you're still, again, because I'm all about balance, I'm all about, you want to go out once in a while to have dinner. It's not always about putting away money for retirement. But if you're meeting all of that and that raise is going to come in, just pretend that you never had that. You put it towards either, I'm going to buy a house later on, I'm going to buy a car, whatever. And that's where the goals come in. That's where it comes back to kind of having an idea of what it is that you're trying to save for, right? So if I am saving to buy a car eventually that I don't want to take out a loan for, it's not going to be a brand new car, but I want to have, $5,000 towards the car. So maybe what I do is, and that's something that I'm going to do 2 years down the road. Maybe every time I get a raise, I'm putting a portion of that money away into something that I know in 2 years, maybe a certificate of deposit. I don't know, something where I know I'm not going to touch it for 2 years. And that forces you to get into that habit of saving. And just doing those automatic saving for retirement. If you start doing it in your 20s, you're going to get closer to the goal than if you wait until now I paid for my kids' college and now I'm 55 years old and now I'm just going to start thinking about my retirement. What you have to do at that point, you're going to have to take on more risk. Where if I was doing a little bit in my 20s, right? If I'm saving in my 20s, you can put 100% in as aggressive as you want, because you have more time to recover when you're 55, 60, 65, and I'm pushing up to 60. When you're getting closer to that, you don't have that much time to recover when the market does do a correction. And that's something that we know is always going to happen in the market. There's always going to be a correction.
So Rebecca, let's talk about that, because unfortunately, the reality of what I see a lot, which is sort of the genesis of, because we're having a conversation around this webinar today, was people who really don't turn to their own retirement, other than they put money into their company's 401k, but they really don't turn to their own retirement planning until their children are out of the house, because we're focused on doing so many different things. So as somebody who maybe is 55, they've got some money put away, but they're not hitting the 99% certainty on your scale, right? What is it that they can possibly be looking at doing to think of planning for their retirement now that they're done sort of planning for their children? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the first thing that you need to do is to find somebody that you can work with that understand what it is that and you have to, in order to have, it has to be a trusting relationship, right? And you can trust the advice that you're getting from clients. When I sit with a client, I will run a financial plan without charging a person anything, because for me, I think giving that person that personal advice, I am going to get paid based upon I don't charge for financial planning, right? I know there are people who charge for the plan. They'll run it for you and then you go and implement it. I think the in order for you to get to your goal, I think you really need to have that plan implemented. Just having a plan means absolutely nothing if you're not doing anything with it. So what I tend to do with prospect clients, and I work with people that have created plans who chose not to work with me for whatever reason, but I hope that they took that plan and they have a roadmap. That's what I call it. You know, you have a roadmap that, hey, people are savvy enough, some of them can go ahead and implement that themselves. But if you haven't started yet, it's not too late. It's never too late. I think you need to have that honest conversation. Is finding somebody that you're comfortable having a conversation here. Hey, this is where I want to be, right? Personally, I would like to retire at 65. Probably not going to happen. But you know, that's what I'm planning for. That doesn't mean I love what I do. So I don't know what I'm going to do. What am I going to do at 65? So I don't think that that's a thing. But what I'm saying is, just because you're 55 or 60 doesn't mean it's too late. It is, you still have time. There are things that you can do, right? Most of us are healthier than our parents. We're living longer. We love whatever. I find more people are doing the things that they love to do, right? Which means that it's not work in a sense because we love what we're doing, right? So you have more time. So you can put off retirement from 65 to 70, right? And if you do that and you don't start taking your Social Security, you are building up a bigger base to get a higher payout once you start taking that Social Security. There are tons of people that I work with that in the past at 70 had to start taking from their 401k or their retirement that they have built up over the years because the government, you know, want their taxes. That has been pushed to 72. So that's another thing that is helpful for people who are in their 50s because it gives you a little bit more time that you can continue working and putting money away. You know, there's nothing wrong also with working part-time, because I find that people with second careers are doing things that they love. So again, it's not work in that sense. So, you know, I think retirement is different for people. I don't know too many people who are retired and do nothing. Does that kind of answer what you were asking, or?
Yeah. So is there like, so look, the people that are listening here today, they're going to talk to their kids. Their kids are going to start saving out of their first paycheck. They're going to live within their means. They will save their raises and they'll do everything that we talked about. But let's talk about maybe some of others of us who, you know, didn't have that conversation with our 20-year-old self to be able to do things. You know, at what point in time do you know, in your experience, do most people really start looking at the planning for the college, the planning for the retirement versus the more haphazard of, I have a 401k plan, it goes there. You know, I'm hoping my kid's really smart and they'll be able to get into Harvard. You know, so are most people that you work with are the 30s, 40s? What sort of the ages, and how do you work with them at different ages?
So I have clients that from in 20s to, I have a 93-year-old client who's still with it. She's online. We do a lot of things online, believe it or not, a 93-year-old. So I run the gamut, but the majority of my clients fall within that 40 to 60 range. That's where I see people start saying, okay, now I need to buckle down, right? Because you're married, you're further on in your career. And what I'm also finding is the younger people in their 20s, they want to be more educated. So even though they might not be doing any investment right now, what I find a lot of them they're getting my newsletters. And the newsletters are something, anybody who's listening and wants that, you can send an email. I'll be happy to add you to my newsletter. It comes out on a quarterly basis. So I have a lot of my younger, my clients, the younger the Gen Z children are signing up for my newsletters. And you know, the beauty of it right now is that information is so widespread. It's good and it's bad in some sense, right? Because I think sometimes people do nothing because they're like, oh my God, I haven't done anything for 20 years. I'm behind. There's no such thing as behind. It just means that there's a starting point for you. And, I talk a little bit, Deirdre, before we went live, that I didn't grow up in a family that talk about money. A lot of what I have done and my husband have done is we because of my field and what I'm doing for a living. So there's nothing that says, I'm going to get this person, they're going to come in, they're going to have, 300,000 say it doesn't work that way. You have to start somewhere. And whether you're starting with systematically putting away $100 a month, or you're starting because now you're in your 50s and you're like, oh my God, I have, $1 million sitting in a checking account that I've had for like 10 years that I really should have talked to somebody, because and I'm not just saying that, it has happened where people had millions of dollars sitting in a checking account for 10 years until they finally had a conversation and was like, wow, imagine what the money could have done for them over that time frame. So there's no wrong, again, and this is why we're trying to get to people early on so that we can impart whatever information we can to the people who are listening and they can pass it on to their children. Or like I said, I find the younger generation, they want to know more. They've gone through a lot, and a lot of them are seeking advice at an earlier age than most of our generation did.
So I think one of the things that becomes even more challenging now is, while there is information, there is such an overload of information.
Yeah.
And I don't care what your age is, but let's say that you're a novice when it comes to thinking about your financial planning, whether because you're 15, 25, 45 or 65, and it's just not your thing at all. Are there some places where people, can consider this is something for me who's not an expert at it? I sort of feel like as soon as you go onto the internet or you turn on any of the channels, like you need to be an expert at it already before you can even understand what it is that they're talking about.
So the balance is Google the balance. It's a great website, and it always has different information. Nerd Wallet is also another great resource for people to get some information on basic things. There are a couple of books out there that I would say for those of us who are a little bit more, Tony Robbins did a book. It's called 7 Steps to Financial Freedom. That's for somebody who wants a little bit more on their own. And then you go back to the classic, right? You have Joel Greenblatt. He did a book called The Little Book That Beats the Market. That's for somebody who wants more information. There's Roger Lowenstein did a book called Buffett, The Making of an American Capitalist. So there's a lot of other things, but there's a lot books like Dummies, Money for Dummies, Money for Dummies. You can start with just the basic, Dummies, Money for Dummies 101, something of that. And if somebody wants have more specific questions, send me an email. I will respond, and I will give you a couple more off the top of I'm just trying to come up off the top of my head of what I think are some of the ones that can be helpful. But there are plenty of information out there. There's a lot, what I find though, a lot of firms, not just a Wells Fargo or any of these other companies, but a lot of firms are doing a lot of just free educational money tip information. And, I was at another firm for 10 years. We did a lot working with the younger generation, because we know that, eventually they're going to inherit the wealth, the transfer of wealth that's going to take place in this country. And it is incumbent upon us to educate the younger generation so they understand money. I know we didn't talk a lot about the different asset class. We kind of talk a little bit about, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, alternative. There's so many things out there, but if you are hesitant and don't understand what you're doing, it does not hurt to get some advice, because I don't understand anything about medicine, right? So I don't try to decipher when my back is hurting what that is. I try to go talk to an expert, right, and get some advice. There are a lot of fintech firms that are starting up. SoFi, I think, is one that is doing a lot with with the younger generation. So, you know, most of the old Wall Street firms are looking for clients to come in having, 250, 300,000 to start. But they're also realizing, and I see a lot of that happening with companies, because like a Wells Fargo, we have different divisions that work with clients starting at different levels. So if I get a client that does not meet the minimum requirements that I work with, there are people that I trust that I can move that person to, that I know that they will be getting the same advice that I would give them, right? So don't be afraid to ask questions. I mean, nobody knows anything. I still am learning every single day about something new. So don't be afraid to ask questions. And a lot of times, advisors, we speak in jargons, we speak in terms that nobody understands. We talk about ETFs and mutual funds and whatever. And what I do on my one-on-one is try to break that down so somebody understand. If you're holding a mutual fund, you're holding shares of different companies versus an individual stock, right? And then when we talk about exchange traded funds or ETFs, you're owning shares of different companies. But I think the education part of it is a good thing, because I think in the long run, the more educated clients you have, the easier my job is. My clients go to bed each night, not the market is down 1,200 points. They're not freaking out, because they know they're on track to reach the goals that we're talking about, that we're working on. And that to me is success.
Okay, so let me just ask you, if I could, just sort of one final question that came up. And it's even more basic. Why do people use a financial advisor versus just, to your point, going and getting some ETFs at Fidelity and things along those lines? You talked about that people tend to transition in their 40s and 50s to using a financial advisor, and they're maybe sort of doing their own investing before that. But what is it that you see, that you mentioned education, where people, when they're looking at planning, should be considering versus, doing your 401k on your own? So that's sort of the last question to ask.
A lot of time what I come across is there's a lot of duplication, and we talk a teeny bit about diversification, and what they don't when you're buying Amazon over here, and you buy this mutual fund that has Amazon and all these other tech funds, you are taking on risk that you don't even realize that you are, right? So that's where the biggest thing comes in. People are like, oh no, I'm fine, I have 6 mutual funds. But when you drill down into those 6 mutual funds, they all hold the same thing, which means that your risk on the risk level, because now you're telling me you're conservative, but when I take a look at the mutual funds that you have, your risk level is for an aggressive growth person. And that's the difference between trying to do it on your own than working with an advisor, because any advisor who's worth our salt is going to be brutally honest with our clients about, hey, you want to make 10%. If you want to make 10% per year, you have to take on this much risk, right? And then educating them the correlation between risk and reward, right? You can't make 10% with taking on 0 risk. It doesn't work. And if anybody tells you, I'm going to make you 10% without any risk, without you have it, run as far away as you can, because that is impossible. It's not possible.
Understood. So if you want to flip to the next slide, we did have one question that came in that I wanted to address, which was about the standby guardian. The question is whether or not that would be part of your estate. or if that would be a separate document. And it's a separate document. Under the statute, they actually have a form of the document. If you have any questions specifically, just shoot me an email. I'm happy to send you the statutory site for it. But it specifically says in the event that something, if I become incapacitated, if I were to pass away, here's the immediate person who can have control over my minor children. That control can last for a 6-month period of time. We often also use that, particularly where we have families where the appropriate guardians potentially live overseas, so that we have sort of an immediate guardian in place and then somebody else in place. But with that, I want to thank you all so much for joining us today, and I hope you found this valuable. You just had that one moment of, wow, I didn't know that, we hope for at the beginning. If you want more information on what we've discussed today, please visit porzioplanning.com or email Rebecca. Her contact information is on the screen right now. Rebecca, I wanted to thank you so much for joining us today. I have notes that I scribbled down here in terms of, and I learned so much, so I appreciate it. Is there any just last one takeaway that you have for our audience today?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, because the standby guardian was what I was putting down on my notes when I talked to clients. I was like, and how long have we been working together with clients? And I was not aware of that standby guardian, so I'm going to need a little bit more about that. So if you take nothing away from anything else that I said, do a plan, get a plan in place. And that just means, sit down on you can do it on your laptop. You can find some of the website out there where you can create your own plan, but create a budget and start doing some of those basic things. Because I think once you start with the budget, you find that a lot of those other pieces will fall into place. And I'm happy for anyone who's listening and wants to. I'm happy, like I said, to run a financial plan for you, and without charging you a fee for a financial plan, which usually, it's $2,500 to $5,000 is typically what we charge for some people. I have people who come who just wants me to do a plan and have no intention of working with me, and we will charge anywhere from $25,000 to $5,000. But for people listening, I am willing to run a financial plan for you. You can take with it, and hope that you will decide to work with me. But if not, try to implement some of the recommendations that you get from that.
Thank you very much for that. And for our audience, if there's any other topics that you'd like to see us cover, we absolutely welcome your feedback. Please just drop me an email. It is a joy and an honor to bring other knowledgeable individuals to just give our community here more information, because as we said, an empowered family is one that is going to be able to make better decisions for themselves. And hopefully they can leave the gift of memories behind, as opposed to a mess where you sort of need somebody like me to clean up. So with that, we appreciate your attention, your questions, your feedback, and sharing this information with others. And we look forward to continuing to support you through knowledge. Thank you, everybody. And thank you so much, Rebecca. Have a great day. Take care.
Thanks for having me. Bye, guys.
Bye.